The morning light filtered through the thin curtains of Naomi's small apartment, painting golden lines across her brown skin. She stood by her dresser, running her fingers through a box filled with memories, old Polaroids, handwritten notes, and a few trinkets wrapped in faded tissue. Her grandmother's things had been stored there since the funeral, untouched, but today felt different. She reached for a small velvet pouch tucked deep inside the box. When she opened it, a glimmer caught her eye, an old gold necklace, simple yet elegant, with a delicate pendant shaped like a crescent moon and a rose intertwined. Naomi held it up to the light. It shimmered softly, the kind of shine that time couldn't dull. Her heart warmed as memories of her grandmother flooded back, the stories she told, the lullabies she hummed, and the way she'd whisper, "This necklace has seen love, loss, and everything in between." Naomi smiled faintly. She had never understood those words, until now. It had been a year since her grandmother's passing, and Naomi often felt lost, struggling between her job at the cafe and her classes. But today, as she prepared for a dinner with her boyfriend, Darius and his family for the first time, she wanted something that reminded her of strength, of home. She clasped the necklace around her neck, looking at her reflection in the mirror. It didn't just feel like jewelry, it felt like armor. The moment it touched her skin, a strange calm filled her, like warmth spreading from the pendant straight into her heart. Hours later, Naomi stood outside Darius's family home, a grand, old-fashioned mansion on the outskirts of town. The house was intimidating. Brick walls, tall windows, and a perfectly kept lawn. She adjusted her dress nervously as Darius smiled and took her hand. "You look perfect," he said softly. But as they entered, Naomi couldn't shake the feeling that something about the house seemed familiar. The faint scent of old wood and lavender reminded her of something she couldn't quite place. Inside, Darius's mother, Evelyn, greeted her with a warm but restrained smile. His father, Charles, was polite, though distant. Everything was going smoothly, laughter, conversation, and soft music in the background, until Evelyn's eyes suddenly froze. Naomi noticed the change instantly. The woman's gaze was locked on her chest, at the necklace. That necklace. Evelyn's voice faltered. Naomi instinctively touched it. "Oh, this? It belonged to my grandmother," she said, smiling nervously. Charles's fork dropped against his plate. The sound echoed in the silence that followed. Darius looked between them, confused. Evelyn leaned forward, her face pale. "Your grandmother? What was her name?" Naomi hesitated. "Margaret. Margaret Ellis." The room grew cold. Charles's expression darkened, and Evelyn's hands trembled as she exchanged a silent look with her husband. Darius frowned, looking lost. "What's going on?" he asked, glancing between his parents. Evelyn didn't answer. Instead, she stood abruptly and walked to a cabinet near the wall. She opened a drawer, her hands shaking, and pulled out a small framed photograph. She turned it toward Naomi. Naomi's breath caught in her throat. It was an old picture, worn, yellowed, from decades ago, but she recognized the face instantly. Her grandmother, standing beside a young man who looked shockingly familiar. The same sharp jawline, the same eyes as Charles. Naomi's voice trembled. "That's my grandmother." "But how?" Evelyn's voice cracked as she whispered. "Because that young man beside her was my husband." The silence that followed was unbearable. Naomi's pulse thundered in her ears. She couldn't make sense of it. Her grandmother and Darius's father? Darius looked at his father in disbelief. "Dad, is this true?" Charles' eyes were distant, guilt-ridden. He nodded slowly. "It was before I met your mother, before we were even married." He turned toward Naomi, his face pale. "Your grandmother and I, we were together. For a short time, she left suddenly, and I never saw her again." Naomi's world spun. The necklace felt heavy now, as if it carried not just memories, but secrets. Evelyn wiped her eyes, her tone trembling between hurt and confusion. "So that necklace was hers all along." Naomi felt like she couldn't breathe. The necklace that once symbolized love and strength now seemed cursed, the bridge between two families tied by a past neither wanted to face. As dinner ended in awkward silence, Naomi excused herself. Outside, she stood by the car, gripping the pendant tightly. The night air was cold, but her thoughts burned with questions. Who was her grandmother to them, really? Why did Evelyn's reaction seem more than shock, almost fear? And what truth had been buried so deep that even the dead seemed to whisper it through gold and memory? The necklace glimmered faintly in the moonlight, as if it held more to say, more secrets to tell. And Naomi knew one thing for certain: this was only the beginning. The night after the dinner was long and restless. Naomi lay awake, the moonlight slipping through her blinds, casting faint shadows across her face. The necklace glowed faintly against her chest, a reminder of what she'd heard, what she'd seen, and what she didn't yet understand. Every word Charles had said replayed in her mind. "Your grandmother and I, we were together." It sounded simple, but it felt like an earthquake beneath her life, shaking everything she thought she knew. The next morning, she couldn't resist. She called her mother. "Mom, Naomi said softly. I need to ask you something. Did Grandma ever mention someone named Charles? Charles Williams? There was silence on the other end. Then, a faint, uneasy sigh. Why are you asking me that? Her mother finally said. Naomi's voice wavered. Because I met him. Last night. At Darius's house. Her mother went quiet again. Longer this time. Then came the sound of movement, like someone sitting down heavily. Naomi, she said slowly, your grandmother never wanted to talk about him. But yes, she knew a Charles. A long time ago. Before I was born. Naomi's heart raced. Then he could be, I don't know. Her mother interrupted, her voice trembling. I only know she left town suddenly, and she never spoke of him again. Every time I asked, she'd just say, some stories are better left buried. Naomi looked at the necklace again. Buried stories. That's exactly what it felt like. Later that day, Naomi went to see Darius. He looked exhausted too, like the revelation had kept him awake all night. My parents haven't stopped talking about it, he said, pacing the living room. My mom's devastated. She thinks your grandmother ruined their marriage before it even started. Naomi frowned. But that doesn't make sense. She left before they were married. Darius shrugged helplessly. That's what I said. But Mom keeps saying there's more. She said your grandmother took something from her. Something precious. Naomi's eyes widened. What kind of something? She wouldn't tell me, he said, sitting down beside her. But she told me to stay away from you for a while. Naomi felt her chest tighten. What? Darius nodded slowly. She's scared. She says the necklace you wear is cursed. That it brings back things that were meant to be forgotten. Naomi almost laughed, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her fear. That's ridiculous. But deep down, something inside her whispered otherwise. Because since she'd worn the necklace, strange things had started to happen. Faint dreams of places she'd never been, faces she didn't know, and a constant ringing in her ears like whispers carried through time. That night, Naomi sat at her desk, holding the pendant close. She turned it over, tracing the tiny symbols engraved on the back. 2 initials, C.W. and M.E. Charles Williams and Margaret Ellis. Her chest tightened. So it was their necklace. A token of love lost, found again in the most unexpected way. But what did it mean now? She decided to visit her grandmother's old house the next day, the place that had been locked and untouched since the funeral. It was an old cottage on the outskirts of town, surrounded by tall trees and memories. As she stepped inside, the air smelled of dust and lavender. Everything was still, the furniture covered in white sheets, the old grandfather clock frozen at a time long past. She wandered to the small drawer her grandmother used to keep her letters in. Inside, she found a stack of envelopes tied together with a faded blue ribbon. The top one was addressed simply, to Charles. Naomi's heart pounded. She carefully opened it. My dearest Charles, if you are reading this, it means I could not face you again. The truth I carry is heavier than this necklace you gave me. I am leaving to protect more than just myself. I am protecting our secret, one that could break 2 families. Forgive me for disappearing. Forgive me for what I took with me. Naomi's eyes filled with tears. She turned the page over. There was something else, written hurriedly in a different ink. If anyone ever finds this, tell them. The past always finds its way home. Naomi sat there for a long time, holding the letter to her chest. The necklace felt heavier now, like it was pulling her down into the truth buried beneath her family's name. Just then, her phone buzzed. A message from Darius. You need to come over. My dad told me something. It changes everything. Her fingers trembled as she grabbed her keys. She didn't know what waited for her at that house, but she knew the necklace wasn't just a symbol of love. It was a key, and the lock it opened was about to reveal something that would change both their families forever. Naomi took one last look at her grandmother's picture before leaving the house. The old woman's eyes, kind and wise, seemed almost alive. As Naomi stepped into the night, the pendant glinted one last time under the moonlight, as if her grandmother's spirit was watching, whispering, "You're getting close." Naomi's car tires crunched over the gravel driveway as she pulled up outside Darius's house. The mansion looked colder tonight, its lights dimmer, the air heavier. She could feel the tension long before she rang the bell. Darius opened the door almost immediately. His face was pale, his eyes red from lack of sleep. "Come in," he said quietly. "My dad's in the study. He wants to talk to you." Naomi hesitated. "Your mom? She's upstairs. She doesn't want to see either of us right now." The way he said it made Naomi's heart ache. What had this necklace done? It felt like a curse that had cracked open old wounds no one was ready to face. As she walked through the hall, her reflection flickered faintly in the mirror beside the stairs. For a brief moment, it wasn't her reflection she saw, but her grandmother's face. She blinked, shaken, but forced herself forward. The study door creaked as Darius pushed it open. Inside, Charles sat behind a large oak desk, his hands clasped together tightly, his face lined with years of guilt. "Naomi," he began softly. "Please sit." She didn't. "You said you wanted to talk." "So talk." Charles nodded slowly. "I owe you the truth. All of it." Naomi folded her arms. "Then start from the beginning." He took a deep breath. "Your grandmother and I met when we were very young, before Evelyn, before this house, before everything. I was in college then. She was working at the library part-time. We fell in love quickly, too quickly. My family didn't approve. They thought she was beneath us. They made me choose between her and my inheritance." He paused, his voice breaking slightly. and I made the wrong choice. Naomi's eyes softened, though her anger still burned. So you left her? Charles nodded. Yes, and I regretted it every day. Months later, I went looking for her, but she was gone. I thought she'd moved on, until I saw her again briefly years later. She was pregnant. I didn't ask questions. I was engaged to Evelyn by then, but I knew. Naomi's stomach twisted. You mean my mother? Charles's eyes met hers, filled with unspoken pain. Yes. Naomi stepped back as if struck. You're saying my mother is your daughter? Darius's head shot up. What? That makes Naomi's voice cracked. That makes me your... Charles raised his hand, his voice trembling. That's not what it seems. Please, listen before you jump to conclusions. Naomi's heart was pounding so loud she could barely hear his words. Your grandmother came to see me one last time, Charles continued. She told me she didn't want anything from me. Not money, not acknowledgement. She said she wanted her child to grow up free from this family's curse. She warned me to keep my distance. Curse? Naomi whispered. Charles looked at her necklace. That necklace. It belonged to my mother first. It was passed down to the woman she believed carried our bloodline's truth. But she also believed it brought tragedy. Every woman who wore it suffered loss. He leaned back, rubbing his forehead. Your grandmother gave it back to me that night, said it was a symbol of everything she was leaving behind. But when she left, it vanished. I thought she destroyed it, until I saw it on you. Naomi looked down at the pendant, her hands trembling. It was in her belongings. She must have taken it back. Darius spoke softly. So, my dad is your mother's father. That means we're... Naomi closed her eyes, her voice barely a whisper. Cousins. Silence filled the room, heavy, devastating. Naomi could hear her heartbeat, could feel the walls closing in. Everything inside her screamed to run, to tear the necklace off and never look back. But she couldn't move. Charles stood up, his voice breaking with remorse. I didn't know, Naomi. I swear to you I didn't. When I met you at dinner, I had no idea who you were. I never imagined... Naomi turned toward the door, her voice trembling with hurt. You should have told the truth years ago. You could have spared us this pain. She walked out, tears streaming down her face, the pendant cold against her skin now. Darius followed her outside. Naomi, please, don't, she said, shaking her head. You can't fix this. We can't fix this. But it's not our fault, he cried. We didn't know. I know, she said, her voice breaking. But now we do. She got in her car and drove off, her vision blurred with tears. The city lights passed in a haze as memories replayed in her mind. Her grandmother's smile, her words, her stories about love and loss. Now she understood what she meant. When Naomi reached home, she ripped the necklace from her neck and threw it onto the table. The pendant hit the wood with a metallic clink, and then, to her shock, it split open. Inside was a tiny folded note, yellowed with age. With trembling hands, Naomi unfolded it. To whoever finds this, truth brings pain, but also peace. Blood may divide us, but love will find its way home. Naomi's tears fell onto the paper, blurring the ink. She realized now her grandmother hadn't wanted to destroy the past. She'd wanted to leave a message for the future. The truth had finally come home. But peace still felt far away. As she looked at the broken pendant under the light, something inside it shimmered faintly. A small, hidden engraving that she hadn't seen before. M.E. The story isn't over. Naomi stared at it in silence, her chest heavy. Somewhere in that message was one more secret, one more piece of the truth she hadn't yet uncovered. And deep down, she knew she wasn't done searching. Tanya couldn't shake off the strange feeling that lingered after her boyfriend, Marcus, saw her necklace for the first time. His reaction had been subtle, just a quick pause, a flicker of recognition in his eyes, and then a forced smile. But Tanya knew Marcus too well to miss it. Something about that necklace had unsettled him deeply. A few days later, Marcus invited Tanya to meet his parents for dinner. It was supposed to be a special night, their first formal introduction, something Tanya had looked forward to for months. She stood before the mirror, adjusting her curls and smoothing her emerald green dress. Around her neck, the old necklace gleamed faintly in the soft bedroom light, its intricate gold filigree glowing with an antique charm. This belonged to my grandmother, Tanya whispered to herself, touching the pendant gently. And now it's part of me. She reached Marcus's family home just before sunset. It was a large, stately house in an old part of town. Red bricks, white pillars, and a yard lined with rose bushes. The kind of place that carried generations of stories in its walls. Marcus greeted her at the door, trying to hide his nervousness. You look beautiful, he said, but his eyes drifted briefly, again, to the necklace. Tanya noticed it this time. Is everything okay? She asked lightly, tilting her head. Yeah. Just, come in. Mom's been waiting. Inside, the air smelled of roasted chicken, herbs, and something faintly woody, like an old house trying to hold on to its secrets. Marcus's mother, Mrs. Ellison, greeted her with polite warmth. A hug that was just a little too tight, a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. So, Tanya, Mrs. Ellison said, leading her to the dining room. Marcus has told us so much about you. The table was set elegantly, candles, silverware, wine glasses glinting in the dim light. Tanya smiled nervously, tucking a curl behind her ear. It's really nice to finally meet you all, she said. But as she sat down, Mrs. Ellison's gaze froze. Her eyes were locked, not on Tanya's face, not on her dress, but on the necklace. There was silence, a long, chilling silence. That necklace. Mrs. Ellison finally spoke, her voice tight, trembling slightly. "Where did you get it?" Tanya blinked, caught off guard. "Oh, this? It belonged to my grandmother. She passed it down to me before she died." The air in the room seemed to thicken. Mr. Ellison, who had been quietly sipping his wine, set down his glass with a soft clink. His expression darkened. "Your grandmother's name?" he asked quietly. "Lydia," Tanya replied. "Lydia Carter." Mrs. Ellison's hand flew to her mouth. Marcus looked between them, confused. "Mom, what's wrong?" Mrs. Ellison's eyes were wide, filled with disbelief and fear. "Lydia Carter," she whispered. "That name, that necklace." "Marcus, don't you see?" Tanya's heart pounded. "What's happening?" she asked, her voice shaking. Mrs. Ellison stood up slowly, walking closer to Tanya. "That necklace," she said softly, "used to belong to my mother." Tanya's breath caught. "That's not possible," she said weakly. "My grandma said she got it from her mother during the 1950s. Mrs. Ellison shook her head. "No, dear, that's impossible. Because my mother's necklace went missing in 1953. The room went silent again." Marcus's face had gone pale. He looked at Tanya as if seeing her for the first time. How could that be?" Tanya whispered. Mrs. Ellison's voice trembled. "Your grandmother, Lydia Carter, you said? She was our housemaid." Tanya felt the floor tilt beneath her. "No," she said, shaking her head. "That can't be true. My grandma never... She disappeared," Mrs. Ellison said, interrupting. "One night, and so did my mother's necklace." The words hung in the air like a heavy fog. Tanya's mind raced. Her grandmother had always refused to talk about her younger years. She used to say, "Some things are better left buried." Tanya never understood why. Now, she felt as if she were standing on the edge of a truth she wasn't ready for. Marcus tried to step in. "Mom, maybe there's some mistake. You can't just..." But his mother's expression was unshakable. "It's the same necklace. I'd recognize that emerald stone anywhere." Tanya clutched the pendant, her fingers trembling. "Then what does that mean?" she asked in a whisper. Mrs. Ellison hesitated. "It means," she said softly, "that our families are connected in a way neither of us expected." The candles flickered as a gust of wind brushed through the slightly open window. The necklace, resting against Tanya's skin, seemed suddenly heavier, and deep in her heart, she knew this was just the beginning. The silence that filled the Ellison dining room was suffocating. Tanya could hear her own heartbeat echoing in her ears as the truth twisted around her like smoke. Impossible to grasp, but impossible to ignore. Her grandmother, Lydia Carter, the family maid of the Ellisons, the missing necklace, the same one now around her neck. Mrs. Ellison stood rigid by the table, her eyes glassy, caught somewhere between disbelief and recognition. Marcus sat frozen, torn between the woman he loved and the family that had raised him. Finally, Tanya broke the silence. "My grandmother was no thief," she said softly but firmly. "She raised me with pride. She never took anything from anyone." Mrs. Ellison turned toward her, her expression softening, but only slightly. "I'm not saying she stole it, dear. I don't understand how it ended up with you. My mother loved that necklace. She said it came from her own grandmother, passed down through generations. It vanished one night along with Lydia." Tanya's throat felt dry. "Disappeared?" Mrs. Ellison nodded. "Yes, it was 1953. Lydia had been working with our family for years. She was kind, gentle. I was just a child, but I remember her humming lullabies while she worked in the garden. Then one morning she was gone. My mother said she'd run away, but..." She paused, her voice trembling. "She also said Lydia took the necklace with her." Marcus's brows furrowed. "Mom, that doesn't make sense. Why would she steal it after years of loyal service?" Mr. Ellison finally spoke, his voice deep and deliberate. "Because your grandmother's father, my wife's father, was a man of secrets. He wasn't always the kind of man people thought he was." Tanya looked at him, puzzled. "What do you mean?" Mr. Ellison hesitated, then sighed. "There were rumors back then, whispers that he had relationships with the help. It was a different time, and people didn't talk about those things. But when Lydia disappeared, your grandmother, my mother-in-law, fell into silence. She burned old letters, destroyed photographs, almost as if she was trying to erase something or someone." Tanya's hands trembled. "Are you saying that my grandmother and your..." Mrs. Ellison nodded slowly. "It's possible. Maybe Lydia wasn't just a maid in this house. Maybe she was family." The words struck Tanya like lightning. Family. Could it be true? If Lydia had a child, her mother, and that lineage led to Tanya, then somewhere in the tangled branches of history, Tanya and Marcus might share blood. Her stomach churned. She stood abruptly from the table, her chair scraping against the wooden floor. No, that can't be. You're saying my grandmother, your mother's maid, had some kind of affair with your grandfather?" Mrs. Ellison looked down, shame clouding her features. "I don't know for sure, but if she did, then it explains everything. Why my mother buried the past, why Lydia vanished, why you have the necklace now." Tanya took a shaky breath, her eyes filling with tears. My grandmother used to tell me stories about a house with roses, a little girl who loved to watch her sing. I thought they were just memories of a kind family she once worked for. But now, her voice cracked. Marcus rose from his chair, walking over to her. Tanya, hey! Don't, she said sharply, stepping back. If this is true, Marcus, what does that make us? Marcus's face paled. We don't know that for sure. We need proof. Mrs. Ellison looked at her son, her voice steady but sorrowful. There might be a way to find out. I still have some of my mother's old letters, hidden in the attic. Maybe they'll tell us what really happened. Tanya hesitated. Every part of her wanted to run, to escape the weight of what she had just learned. But another part, the part that always needed to know, urged her to stay. Show me, she whispered. The family moved slowly to the attic, their footsteps echoing up the wooden staircase. Dust hung in the air like forgotten memories. Mrs. Ellison opened an old trunk and pulled out a faded bundle of envelopes, tied together with a fraying ribbon. She handed them to Tanya. These are from Lydia, she said softly. Tanya's fingers trembled as she untied the ribbon. The letters smelled of time, ink, dust, and something bittersweet. She began to read aloud. My dearest Rose, I cannot stay here any longer. They will never let me love him. Not with the world the way it is. I am carrying his child, and I must protect our baby from their cruelty. The necklace he gave me, I'll keep it safe until our child is old enough to know where they came from. Tanya's breath caught. The room fell silent. Mrs. Ellison's hand trembled as she reached for the letter. Rose was my mother, she whispered. That means, Lydia was telling her. Mr. Ellison's voice was barely audible. It means the man she loved was Rose's father. Tanya dropped the letter, her heart racing. So Lydia's child, my grandmother's baby, was your mother's half-sibling. Marcus stepped closer, his expression torn between horror and awe. That means we're distant relatives. Tanya's voice broke. We share blood. The necklace around her neck suddenly felt like a shackle, a reminder of a forbidden love that had crossed generations and found its way back to her. Tears welled in her eyes. My grandmother never told me because she was protecting me, she said softly. Protecting me from this truth. Marcus took her hand gently. We'll figure this out. This doesn't have to change everything. But Tanya shook her head, her voice barely above a whisper. It already has, as the candlelight flickered in the attic. The truth hung heavy between them. Not just a story of love and betrayal, but a haunting revelation that had been buried for 70 years. And the necklace, once a symbol of family pride, now gleamed like a curse that refused to be forgotten.